Ton, would you like to make the introductions?
It will be my pleasure. Sephardic World is brought to you by the Sephardic Genealogical Society. As always, we thank our patrons who make all of this possible and who are joining us on Zoom. And we also welcome our viewers on YouTube. Julian Land lives down under, and we appreciate that he got up very early to talk to us. Very, very early. It's summer there. He trained in theoretical physics and mathematics, followed by a 30-year career with Australia's National Science Research Corporation. He descends from the Lousada family and runs the popular www.Baruch.Lousada.org website. And he will speak about the families that figure on that website. Do the Barrow family descend from the Baruch Lousada? Julian discusses the links between these eminent Victorian families whose members included mayors of 2 English towns and 3 British generals. Are they Sephardic-descended, as was claimed, or Ashkenazim? Are they even Jewish? And who are the rival claimants for the dukedom? The Fischl from Dirsztays of Vienna. Julian will guide us through this complex and through entertaining claims of Sephardic and noble ancestry. Welcome, Julian. And you can speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David. Today, we'll talk about the Barrows and the Fischl von Dirsztays. If I can get my screen. These families are avid associates and probably distinguished descendants of the Baruch Lousadas. Everything I say today is on my website, whose address is there. This website first went live in 2011, and now 11 years later, I think it's appropriate that I start talking a little about what I've spent 11 years discovering. The fascinating thing about the talk today, I find, is that there is a major role reversal which has gone on. To exit Iberia in the 17th century, the Baruch Lousadas valued connections with the families Enriques Ferro, Rodrigo Pereira, Montesinos, and Mercado, as I discussed in my last talk. But now, in the 18th century, the Baruch Lousada connection is valued by the Barrows, as in the 19th century it was by the Fischl von Dirsztays. There are many questions here, and I'm not going to answer many of them today, but I will look into who were the Barrows and who were the Fischl von Dirsztays. I'll start with the fairly well-known Simon Barrow of Bath, key ancestor of the Barrows. He was a prominent figure in Bevis Marks for a period. He converted to Christianity, however, in 1828. He was mayor of Bath for 1 term in 1837, and he was an alderman for 6 terms. He lived in a house which wasn't quite as big as that when he lived in it, because the top 2 stories have been added and the place is now a hotel, which is still there. His son Benjamin was a doctor who was mayor of Ryde for 9 terms from 1874. Benjamin was one of the civic leaders in the fight against cholera via a clean water supply. He was also an ancestor of a whole dynasty of British generals, and 3 of which I'll show here. First, Sir George de Simons Barrow. His grandchildren, my 3rd cousins once removed, are very proud of this man. He was a very creative author of a history of the Barrow family, which goes back to Rook, the secretary and friend of Jeremiah the prophet in the times of Nebuchadnezzar. There was a fair bit of imagination, I believe, in this history. The next distinguished general is Sir Edmund George Barrow. He is he was at the peak of the apex of colonial Britain. Or as you can see, he was a member of the Council of India that period there, and he is the great-grandfather of a fellow called Edmund Barrow, who's doing some biographical work, so I won't say much more about it, other than to say that Ed Barrow, being a male line Jewish descendant, is of great interest, and I hope he's talking to Adam Brown as we speak. The last distinguished general of the previous generation is Major General Lousada Barrow, who achieved distinction in India in the field. And that statue, I believe, is still in India in Lucknow. I'll say a little more about Lousada Barrow shortly. A few basics about Barrow genealogy. My ancestors, the Barrows, bring interesting ancestry to me and the Australian Lousadas. The Australian Lousadas mostly descend from Edward Charles Lousada, but he did have some brothers, and there are some other relatives in Australia also. His parents are shown there. Their parents are shown here, and you can see Simon Barrow of Bath, his sister Bella Barrow, Moses Baruch Lousada, my great-great-grandfather, and Simon Barrow is shown as having married Tryphena Esther Leon de Simons. She's a daughter of Baron Leon de Simons, who was a son of Samuel Michael Lazarus Presburg. Court Jew Simon Michael Presburg is well known. He was an influential financier, as was his son Samuel. Yeah. He's connected to many other European court Jews, including the Oppenheims and the Wertheimers. He's an ancestor of Randy Schoenberg, who the creator of Genie.com. He's also the ancestor of many other eminent European Jews. I recently discovered that he's also the ancestor of Australian philosopher Peter Singer, who's the first cousin of a neighbour of mine, has been for 25 years, I only just discovered. And just move this out of the way. My fourth great-grandfather was his son, Baron Leon de Simons, a celebrity jeweller. And here is a portrait of him here. On my website, at one stage, I remarked that I couldn't find a colour image of this. The fifth cousin got in touch and said, I recently saw this the coloured portrait. In fact, he said it's in my living room, and now we have a coloured portrait of Baron Leon de Simons. And this is the image which you can find in many places, including Genie.com. The Barrows had a few creative theories about how they were related to the Baruch Lousadas. From the Barrow family tree, a descent from Moses Baruch Lousada of London was claimed. But Moses died in 1699, whereas Simon Barrow of Barbados, the grandfather of Simon Barrow of Bath, was born in 1709. Oops. Literature equates the Barrows and Baruch Lousadas. For example, the book Sephardic of England by Hymson. But the Barrow name does not imply a link with the Baruch Lousadas. The Barrow graves show Simon Barrow of Barbados was Simon Baruch, Ashkenazi name, while the Sephardi Baruch Lousada name appeared in Livorno as early as 1640. The error is understandable, of course, because Moses Baruch Lousada sometimes used the name Moses Barrow. This is not strictly a legend, although it is a legend, but I don't doubt this one. Simon Barrow of Bath was a special envoy to the court of Vienna for the Prince Regent, who became George IV. I have tried to find out why he went to Vienna, I think it was to commission paintings for the Prince Regent's Waterloo collection, which are in the Waterloo Gallery at Windsor Palace. But that gallery hasn't got evidence that Simon Barrow Bath was involved in that commissioning, but he probably was, I'm not sure. Something to be found out for the future. But at the minimum, this shows that the father-in-law, Baron Leo Simons, retained Vienna links. Very hard to see how a recent Barbados descendant could have been selected for such a role. So the Baruch Lousada marriages with the Barrows, several of them, followed a link in Barbados where the Barrows first developed marriage links with the Massier family, links to the remnant Baruch Lousadas in Barbados, leading to the London Business Association around the years before and after 1800. Two marriages in 1806 from my ancestors, and then 32 London marriage, again my ancestors. The thing which strikes one about, as a Baruch Lousada, about the Barrow family tree is that four of them use Lousada as a forename. One I've just mentioned, Major General Lousada Barrow, three others. All this occurred after the first Baruch Lousada marriage in 1806. And it occurred before the Lousada dukes claimed the title of the Duke of Lousada around 1848. And so there's a genuine element in this. Can't be exactly sure why that name was chosen, other than general family significance. The Barrows obtained their own coat of arms, as I've shown above. And so all one can conclude at this stage is that naming is possible evidence of Baruch Lousada ancestry, but cannot prove it. In 1826, Moses, the second Moses, got a bit depressed and committed suicide. His obituary says that his investments were down. Possibly he had some Caribbean plantation investments in the lead up to abolition of slavery. And this possibly was one of the areas of investment which wasn't good. But more damaging to respectability, England at that time, and a very important concept, was his first and eldest daughter eloped with a clerk in his broking firm, and this was a great deal of shame. Amongst other things, the first daughter ended up having 4 marriages. But that's another story. Bella Barrow therefore became a widow in 1826 with 9 children. Shortly afterwards, Tryphena the Simons died in childbirth, and thus Simon Barrow became a widower, 13 children. Shortly after the death of Tryphena in 1828, brother-in-law Samuel the Simons, a retired broker, married the widow, Bella Barrow. Thus, the 22 cousins had a new family structure. Here are the 22 cousins showing who they married, and there is one cousin-to-cousin marriage, as you can see in the middle there. Are all grandchildren of Jacob Barrow. Now, in the newly reconstituted family structure, you can see that Samuel Leon Simons has stepped into the breach. Simon Barrow converted and pursued a political career. Samuel and Bella educated and married off the children. And miracle of miracles, there was only one cousin-to-cousin marriage. And under these circumstances, one might have thought there would be quite a few. That was the marriage I descend from, as a matter of interest. Samuel de Simon's rescue of the Barrow siblings, to me, highlights the importance of the Pressburg descent. I asked the question, was the marriage of my third great-grandfather, Simon Barrow of Bath, Tryphena Simons, was that a marriage between relatives? Almost certainly it was, given Jewish ancestry, but we don't know exactly what. That is, are the descendants of Simon Barrow of Bath double Pressburg descendants, but other Barrows are single descendants? I believe this to be the case, although the evidence is weak. It's autosomal DNA evidence, which is by its nature weak in these circumstances. I'm a double descendant, and I have a much larger match with Randy Schoenberg than John Griffiths does. I would like to strengthen the statistics here by comparing Ed Barrow with Randy Schoenberg. And Randy, if you're listening, I'd really love it if we could access your DNA again. It was on GEDmatch. It's not there anymore. If you could reconstitute it or send me your DNA details so I could do the match, I'd be extremely grateful. Interesting observation about names. Simon name is common to Simon Michael Pressburg, the well-known courtier, Baron Leon de Simons, who was Judah, son of Samuel, son of Simon. Simon Barrow, who was Shimon Baruch of Barbados, grandson Simon Barrow of Bath. Under Ashkenazi naming rules, as explained to me by Edgar Samuel, Simon Baruch cannot have been a grandson of Simon Michael Pressburg. It suggests Baruch, father, a Sephardi wife. I'm guessing that she was a Baruch Lousada, but that is a guess, because there is no Livorno Ketubot for this. Perhaps the marriage occurred elsewhere. And we would also have the question, how would a family of average Livorno merchants afford to marry a daughter into the wealthy Viennese financial family? There is, of course, a possible answer, which I don't have the evidence for. Baruch may have run up big debts, and therefore the dowry was paper transfer of cancelling debts. There's more work to be done here. Now, let's have a look at the Pressburg descent of the Barrows, starting with this chart you've already seen. We had a few ancestors here, and these ancestors themselves justify a talk on their own, which I won't give now. But I mentioned the goldsmiths. I mentioned Baron d'Aguilar, and I believe a chap called Michael Silver is doing biographical work on Baron d'Aguilar. Gael Nunes, I believe, was a Franco Nunes with Valverde descent via Barbados from Dutch Brazil, but I can't prove that at the moment. Moving up, wife of Simon Barrow Barbados was a woman called Bella Montefiore, and with the help of the recent French book on Livorno Ketchubots, I think it's possible to see how Bella Montefiore relates to the English and other Montefiores. So to this little graph, we add a brother of Simon Barrow Barbados called Gedalia, who was in Prague. We add the hypothesized Baruch Lousada wife. Make Baruch a brother of Samuel. And now we are ready to turn to the Fischl on Dirsztays. Fischl on Dirsztays family tree was given to me by Peter Lousada in 2011 when we first met. There we are meeting at the Vienna cafe in London. Peter had a mountain of Lousada material, which he's very generously shared with me. The most amazing component of this mountain of material is a 5 metre squared Dirsztays family tree. It was 20 sheets of A3 paper all glued together. Peter had it in his garden shed for a few years, so there's a bit of erosion of the fabric of the material. Fortunately, we photographed it and extracted the words. It's now on the website and it's available for all to see. But it did demonstrate considerable Baruch Lousada links to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Firstly, some eminent officials in Dirsztays. Lagos Fischl supported the nationalist Kasuf, The Austrians weren't too happy about this, and Lajos Fischl ultimately died in an Austrian prison somewhere, I'm not sure where. Gutmann Fischl von Dirsztays was a major military contractor and grain dealer. Baron Laszlo von Dirsztays was honorary consul general for the Ottoman Empire in Debrecen and later Vienna, where he lived in the Dirsztays Palace. And I'd like to know whether that palace is still there. I can't find a record. There's a photo picture of him. The last person on this list, which I can't see at the moment, now I can, the very famous in psychological circles, Baron Victor Adolf von Dirsztays, was painted by Oskar Kokoschka and analysed by Sigmund Freud. Baron von Dirsztays was a writer, patient of Sigmund Freud, and painted by his friend Oskar Kokoschka. His thoughts are revealing. Kokoschka wished to reveal the complicated character and emotional turmoil of his sitter. Kokoschka believed that von Dirsztays felt disgust for his Hungarian family and the tasteless nouveau riche manners. Kokoschka believed that this shame manifested itself in a skin disease that not even Freud could heal. Now, I mentioned that Baron von Dirsztays experienced 1,400 hours of psychoanalysis from Freud, so it wasn't a minor campaign. His portrait of von Dirsztays, Kokoschka portrayed him as desperately trying to maintain the appearance of a grand aristocratic figure through florid theatrical hand gestures. 20 years after the portrait was finished, von Dirsztays committed suicide. And such is the prize of eminence. The Baruch Lousada marriages with the Fischl von Dirsztays, more recent than in the case of the Barrows. Around 1900, Irene Baruch Lousada married Lajos Fischl, another Lajos Fischl. Around 1900, twin sister Ilona married Victor Adolf von Dirsztays, we've just seen. They were daughters of the fifth and last Lousada Duke, Edward Eugene. This was quite an amazing thing. But as the author of the tree, the family tree, was a grandson of Ilona, and despite the fact that I can't verify this information at the moment, I think that's probably correct. An amazing thing happened. Already a brother-in-law of Irene, Fischl, born in 1878 and died in 1939, obtained official Hungarian approval to use the Lousada title. The Hungarian Parliament approved this. Other branches of the family simply contented themselves with their own noble title, von Dirsztays, which they obtained through meritorious service to the claims of Baruch Lousada ancestry by the Fischl von Dirsztays come from the tree. There, a concoction, I believe, was made. That is to say, descent from a chap called Moritz Barrow. The origin given for Moritz Barrow was very creative and I think fictional. It involves Jamaican Baruch Lousadas, who I believe were made up. It's much more likely that this chap's real name was Moses Baruch. Except for the Barbados nephews of Simon Barrow of Barbados, something we know from the will, the only surviving nephews are the children of Gedalia Baruch of Prague. Of course, 1744 expulsion of Jews from Prague that may have intruded here conclude that Moses Baruch was not the ancestor of the Fischl von Dirsztays. Gedalia was a far better source of the Fischl von Dirsztays. He was known to have descendants. Moses could have been a Lousada descendant and a brother of Simon and Gedalia. So to look at the Pressburg descent of the Fischl von Dirsztays, start with the chart we've already seen, simplified a bit, and we add in Moses Rich Baruch to Esquire. And we had three people whose details were supplied to me by a DNA match of mine, and I'm very grateful for this because there are a number of privacy concerns surrounding this. And whilst I'm not able to double check any of this at the moment, I believe these ancestors make it easy or make it possible to at least construct a plausible scenario as to how the official von Dirsztays appeared. We've also added a man called Fischl and his relatives who appear on Genie.com, but they don't appear in the Dirsztay family tree. And the following links are suggested by this. Jacob and Baruch are probable sons of a sister of Baruch, not a brother, because the birth orders are the wrong way around, bearing in mind who the grandparents were. That is to say, I believe they are stepsons, not sons of Gedaliah. I believe that Isaac is a possible brother of Fischl, thereby uniting the family branches. Further sons of the distinguished court theorist Simon Michael Pressburg here. Michael Samuel is a marriage link with Fischl. And Abraham Simon is a marriage link with a DNA match of mine. And with this chart here, we can suggest how officials who don't appear in the Dirsztay family tree but appear on Genie.com arise. That is to say, they arise from Fischl. Fischl von Dirsztays originate from Jacob here, and I list some of the descendants. And I've been very fortunate because of the website to have made contact with a descendant of Ella von Dirsztay, and she and her husband have been able to confirm for me a number of the official von Dirsztays who appear on the Dirsztay family tree, such as the power of the internet and website. So that picture, I've reached what I wanted to do, which is to give a suggestion as to how the Fischls and Barrows came about. Both have marriage links and are accompanied by claims of ancestry by both Barrows and Fischl von Dirsztays. Yet to conclusively prove these claims, but after 11 years, I feel it's time I should be talking about it. Analysis of Barrow ancestry helps us Fischl von Dirsztay ancestry, both of whom appear in Pressburg ancestry. It remains for me to acknowledge the people who have been constant supporters of me throughout my work, including Edgar Samuel, Tom Thielen, Michael Bass, Jarrett Ross, Julia Jenkins, Amanda Gonzalez, Maria Jose Suribas, Bella, Meg Floder, and Randy Schoenberg. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and probably this is a good opportunity to say that our speakers next week include Michael Wass and Ross, who were mentioned below. I'm afraid it's a slightly naughty question to start, but you mentioned at the beginning that somebody had researched back to Nebuchadnezzar. I was just wondering if you could give us some information on that.
General George de Simons Barrow, with his creative short history of the Barrow family, draws a long bow. He draws connections with what he calls the Baruchia. That is to say, the line of descendants of Baruch extending right through Jewish history, both Ashkenazi and Sephardic. He conjures up family links with the Bravenels, and particularly David of Bravenel, the leader of the first reconstituted London Jewish community. David, to be quite honest, my eyes glazed at this because it is dramatic and powerful to have these connections to links with ancient Jewish history, but I'm afraid I'm not particularly persuaded myself to devote any time or effort. On my website, you can find the short history of the Barrow family and by General Sir George de Simons Barrow, and you can read for yourself what exactly he says about Baruch, the scribe, Jeremiah the prophet, Nebuchadnezzar, and so on. But it's too distant a history for me to have dabbled in.
I just find this stuff entertaining. You mentioned or you questioned why a sort of wealthy Ashkenazi family might marry into a sort of average merchant family from Livorno. Obviously I don't know, but I just wonder, and maybe this is Sephardic arrogance, that the Ashkenazi families saw that even if they were richer, that to marry into a Sephardic family was to move up the Jewish social ladder. I don't know if that might be a possibility.
I'm sure it is, David, but not having broadly researched Jewish history, I'm not able to really say too much sensible about it. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm sure there are others who can speak cogently on that. I mean, I know that in England, established Sephardim were very desirable marriage targets for those wishing to move to England, and in the genealogy of the Barrows, who in the genealogy of the Montefiores, you've got the Rothschilds. In the genealogy of the Baruch Lousadas, you've got the Goldsmiths. Also, the Barrows have got the Goldsmiths, and so on. So, the established Sephardim in England, particularly wealthy ones, were seen as being very desirable marriage targets, simply to facilitate the entry into London society, Jewish society. But in the case of Livorno, where presumably Baruch was buying Indian diamonds at the time when Livorno was big in Indian diamonds before Brazilian diamonds were in the market. Presumably he was doing something like that, and possibly, as I say, he may have had a downturn in his fortunes, and extinguishing a debt or two by marrying a merchant's daughter might have been quite a good thing to do. But look, there may be others better qualified to answer your question.
Okay, and so one last question. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar aside, do you think any of them actually are related to the Spanish Grandi Lousada family?
Well, funnily enough, there are several Spanish de Lousada noble families, but I don't believe that the Duke of Lousada, the long-term confidant of Don Carlos III, was Sephardic. I don't even think he was New Christian, although he may have had some New Christian ancestry. There is an older Spanish de Lousada noble family from Asturias, maybe Galicia, I'm not sure. And one can find aristocratic people with that de Lousada name in various parts of the world, but I don't believe they either are Sephardic or even New Christian. So I think Duke de Lousada really has got nothing in common with the Baruch Lousadas other than a convenient similarity of name, because of course Lousada is the Spanish version of Lousada.
So all the Jewish claimants are all frauds.
Well, I can't speak so strongly because as I said last time, David, one does have to admire the Lousada dukes for their, I think the pronunciation is chutzpah. I mean, they showed immense chutzpah by trying to become aristocrats in England with about the grandest possible title they could have seized. I mean, perhaps I'm of a more modest disposition, but if I were going to, shall we say, assume a noble title, I think I would assume something a bit more modest, so that in 100 years' time, you wouldn't have a suspicious person prying into the unlikely connection. You would, as it were, keep a low profile and keep your head below the parapet, if I can put it that way.
Well, you have to dream big.
By the way, did I pronounce chutzpah correctly this time?
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
When they applied for that title in England in the 18th century, did you have to deliver proof that he did descend from the Spanish Lousadas?
At the time when I was commissioning a fair bit of research, Fernando Gonzalez and also Maria Jose Survas did work for me in Madrid. And the official Spanish record of titles does not contain anything helpful to the Baruch Lousadas.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in 1969, and also it turns out in 1914, Spanish descendants of the original one and only Duke Lousada made application to the palace to have the title recreated in their favour. And they were rejected in both cases, both 1914 and 1969. And the reason why they were rejected is largely because the title was Italian, not Spanish. And in actual fact, I believe both those applicants, those Madrid applicants, were interested not so much in the title itself, but in the status associated with being a grandee of the first rank, which meant that they were in the inner circle of official functions and were close to the king. I think that's what it was all about. But both those applications were rejected. But apart from these things, there is no official record in Madrid of anything happening to the title after the first Duke of Lousada died in 1783.
Ali Ergensoy has a question about the Lousadas marrying up when they married to daughters of Leon de Simon. Maybe he had best put it himself.
Hi, sorry, no, I just following on, and sorry, no video. I'm in Istanbul, and it eats up a lot of bandwidth from here, so I'm just on voice. But no, another one of I saw on your chart that Baron Lion de Simon's Pressburg, in other words, daughter Tryphena Esther married into the Baruch Lousada family. But another one of his daughters, I think his eldest daughter, she was Mary Ann Canandla, her Hebrew name was, married Solomon Gomez da Costa, who, although by then was a fairly middling wealthy merchant in London, had gone to Jamaica as a despacho in his youth. So, he was not from a kind of posh Sephardic family at all. And he was the social climber in this case, because he was kind of moving into the Ashkenazi aristocracy, as it were. Pressburg was a fabulously wealthy diamond merchant, and he was nowhere near that. So I'm just sort of wondering whether that equation really works.
Well, Ali, thanks for the question, and I can't give a complete answer to it, but I can make an observation, bearing in mind that in the audience today is Claire Myers. Claire has found a portrait of one of the Costa descendants, and that portrait is on the website. If you go to the section dealing with Baron Leon de Simons and his children, you will find that portrait. And thank you, Claire.
Bernard, would you like to make your claim for the dukedom?
I don't know about that, but first of all, can I thank you? A vast amount of information there, which I'm struggling to assimilate. And I went to your website while you were talking, and it's even denser than your presentation. So it's going to take a long time to get through, but brilliantly done and a lot of work. I have a very specific question. You talked about the DNA evidence, and I wondered if you can say a little more about it. But before you do, can I just throw in, and I may get the timings wrong on this, but a reason why an Ashkenazi family of immense wealth would want to marry into a Sephardic family, any family. There were periods, and we heard about one 3 or 4 weeks ago here, where Sephardim were allowed in certain places and Ashkenazim weren't. So we were told about the case of Vienna. I'm doing a lot of work researching the Sephardim in Scandinavia. And in 1622, the Sephardim specifically were allowed into Denmark, and the Ashkenazim specifically were excluded. So there are stories, and they may not be true, and I'm trying to get some evidence on this, of Ashkenazim from places like Poland and Germany traveling to Denmark and pretending to be Sephardim, because Ashkenazim were not allowed to stay overnight. They could come into the country, but were expected to leave. So that's just a suggestion. And I think that may have been happening in other countries as well. But anyway, back to my question, which is, can you say something about what the DNA has shown, if it's shown anything that you can interpret?
So thank you, Bernard. I should preface what I'm about to say by the fact that by observing that Michael Vass has given me a very stern lecture about getting too excited about autosomal DNA, because I mean it is a very statistical thing, particularly when we have to go back as far as I have to go back. I mean, two generations and so on. Autosomal is very helpful finding lost relatives and so on, but 7 or 8 generations back, it's very much a statistical game, if indeed any of the DNA has survived at all, because the way natural selection, the way genetic reproduction occurs, you effectively lose half your DNA every generation. So blood relatives can have no DNA in common. So it's a very quixotic thing, a very strange, whimsical thing, autosomal DNA. But Jared Ross has also given me a similar sort of lecture, giving me cautionary comments about interpretations. I guess all I can say is that I find autosomal matches to be a way of creating awareness of possibilities. And if you are in hypothesis generating mode and there are autosomal matches, well, then it makes it plausible that the certain matches, certain links are there, and I find it helpful, but it's not conclusive. And the frustrating thing is that after 11 years of assembling, as you say, a vast, dense thicket of detail, it's about time I feel it's about time that I start talking a little and try to tell a few stories out of this. But I mean, DNA is a wonderful thing, and I'm sure it's possible that with autosomal that you can improve the statistics. As I say, if I can get Randy to give us access to his DNA again, and then we can improve the statistics on those Pressburg links of the Barrow. So I'm not really answering your question, I'm sorry, but
there's a question from Simon Kreitler. Julian, I suspect you are aware that Barrow, the former Prime Minister of Barbados, also claimed descent from the Baruch Lousadas. Did you know that? Have you ever found any evidence to support it?
Yes, Mordecai Abel, in his writings on the Caribbean Jews, talked to Barrow, and Barrow's claim was that he was descended from the local Baruch Lousadas, which is quite possible because mixed race descendants were certainly left behind in Barbados, but and in fact, Laura Arnold Liebman writes that these mixed race people were the founders of the independence movement in a number of Caribbean countries, including Barbados. But when I talk to local experts in Barbados, I mean, there will need to be a major sort of research project to follow this up and prove Barrow's claim. Personally, I don't disbelieve it a priori, but because other islands, I believe St. Thomas was involved, possibly St. Kitts, and it's going to be necessary to trace people around the Caribbean islands. Not having done that research, I can't answer it, but it may be true.
Raymond has a question.
Excuse me. Hello, Julian. Just out of curiosity, are you aware of a Herbert G. Lousada? He was the son of George Lousada. Now, George married into the well-known Goldsmith family.
Yep.
Herbert married into the Mercators. Other well-known names there are Montefiore, Melchior, Raphaels. These are all connected to my maternal Jessel family. So I'm just curious to know if you're aware of all this lot. Oh, the D'Amatos family is there as well.
Yes. Well, the answer is yes. On a very personal note, one of the biggest cache of documents that my mother passed on to me was letters written to H.G. Lousada by his cousin in Australia, Edward Charles Lousada, who was very interested in when the next bequest was going to arrive in Australia to support his struggles with the local landscape and farming activities. Because Herbert George was a lawyer who handled family matters. And so I feel that because of this, I feel very close in a way to H.G. Lousada and his descendants, one of whom, Julian, actually was, I met for the first time at my talk in December. So yes.
All right, thank you. Just being nosy.
David, are there any questions on YouTube?
Yeah, Mark is asking if there are any connections with Amsterdam.
Well, certainly in the period 1659, the wonderful period for the Baruch Lousadas between 1659 and 1699, we had the classic three-point family arrangement between Barbados, Amsterdam, and London, and this triangle was the sort of foundation of the Baruch Lousada exit from Iberia. So, but after about the Baruch Lousadas are no longer present in Amsterdam from about 1730, but the people I call the Den Haag Lousadas, who stopped using the Baruch first surname, but they were present in Amsterdam until about 1780. So there is a strong connection. After that time, the connections with Amsterdam came by particularly the Ashkenazi Jews who came to London via Amsterdam. Of course, there was also a very famous Sephardic ancestor, Baron ducal, who came to London via Amsterdam. In fact, his exit from Lisbon was via London, then Amsterdam, then Vienna, back to Amsterdam, then to London. So he did an interesting out and back kind of thing. So yes, Amsterdam is extremely important to the story.
Thank you.
Well, these Baruch Lousadas are everywhere.
Well,
have you been to all the places there where they lived?
As you observed very early on, Ton, that I'm lucky having a surname like Lousada, which is, there's not many of them and they're easy to spot. But in my research, you can see them appear after leaving Iberia. You can see them appear in Livorno, Amsterdam, London, Barbados, then Jamaica, then Suriname, Curacao also. I believe it's a second wave of Baruch Lousadas who appear in New England in early 1700s. From Livorno, the Baruch Lousadas went to Tunisia, and our French colleagues have, in studying the Ketchibot of Tunisia, have picked up a lot of Baruch Lousadas from Tunisia. What happened to them, I'm not sure. A descendant of the Tunisian Baruch Lousadas has tried to get in touch, but I haven't quite got there yet with him. I believe they probably left Tunisia and went back to Livorno because there's a resurgence of Baruch Lousadas in Livorno in about 1810, but I don't know much about them yet.
And have you ever done or promoted Y-DNA research among the Lousadas? It should give you more clues than autosomal, I think.
Yes. Thanks to Michael Bass, I've fed male line Lousada DNA into his work. Relevance to unpicking the Baruch Lousada story, I have not got much back from that, other than general feeling of satisfaction of having helped a good cause. But recently, Adam pointed out a very close Baruch Lousada match from Finland, which was quite amazing. And it turns out that the Finnish family couldn't say much other than that great-great-grandfather had married someone from the Mediterranean. And possibly that's what was going on. It's quite a close Y-DNA match. I think there are 4 sites not in common. In other words, 33 out of 30, or 35 out of 39 in common, which roughly 80 years per step. It's it's maybe 300 years ago, 250 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever been to Lousada? The place
I've been to Lousada.
Okay.
I've been to Lousada, and the immigrant experience in Australia is Greeks and Italians, and people from the Balkans come to Australia, and they have been 10 or 20 generations in the same village. And so when they go home for holiday, they go to the ancestral village. Normally they're disappointed and they come back to Australia again. But in my case, although I think we know that the Lousada name came from the regional town of Lousada near Porto, I don't believe that Baruch Lousadas were there for more than a generation. They moved on to Braganza, Vinhais, Madrid, and so on. And all they took from Lousada was the name. There is nothing in Lousada, the town, of interest to us as a family. And I don't think even in for those who have found Jewish civic remnants, ritual bathing sites, secret synagogues and so on throughout the Iberian Peninsula, I haven't seen any record that there's anything like this existing in the town of Lousada. I think it was very much a transit stop for people who've come from Spain, crossed the border, travelled around looking for somewhere out of the way of the Inquisition to settle. Eventually you get discovered by the Inquisition in Vienna and have to move on again and so on. So I don't think there's much evidence of anything remaining in Lousada of interest, even though one makes visits to these places for sentimental reasons. I don't think there's anything, shall we say, substantive that comes out of it from the research point of view.
Thank you. Shall we start to wrap up? And thank you for that, because I think what's interesting and what emerges from this is that so many families have these stories about sort of aristocratic this or that or the other, and when you actually start to dig, the real story turns out to be much more interesting than some claim to some coat of arms. Although it would be nice if I was related to the Cardinal Mendoza, who was with Ferdinand and Isabella, but I suspect that's not going to happen unless I can sort of make a very special family tree for myself. But no, thank you for that. And of the various people that you mentioned who helped with your research as you've helped with ours, I mean, obviously Ton is here, Randy Schoenberg, Adam Brown, Floribela Frade have all been speakers. Fernando Gonzalez Campo Roman felt his English wasn't good enough, and as we said earlier, Michael Wass and Jarrett Ross will be joining us next week. I hope I haven't missed anyone out from your list there, but thank you very much. And I'm sorry that there is no family tree back to Nebuchadnezzar, but maybe that will be your next talk here.
The next talk will touch on one of the forbidden subjects, slavery. So
slavery is certainly not a forbidden subject here. It's really interesting, and it's an important subject as well. So please come back and speak on that. And thank you. And Ton, would you like to close the meeting?
Thank you to all our patrons who make all of this possible, and many of them are present here. Thank you to our viewers on YouTube. And next week, our special guests are Michael Waas and Jared Ross, and the subject will be the Sephardic diaspora. And the Sephardic diaspora Facebook group was started by David Mendoza, Michael, and me, and we were later joined by Jared Ross. And we will have a little celebratory meeting because at the end of last year, we reached the milestone of 5,000 members. So we'll maybe talk a bit about its history and maybe our plans, how to proceed from there. Once again, thank you all, and a special thank you to Julian, and hope to see you all next week.
Bye-bye.